Have you ever stopped to wonder why we put all of our trust in medical personnel in times of crisis?
1, 2, 3, funk it.
My darling, I love you, 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 I love you.
They're the experts. They know best, right? Who else are we going to trust the literal life of our child to? I guess a better question is, why don't we ask doctors and medical personnel more questions when our children are in their care? I realize not everyone is outspoken or even confident in their ability to seek answers. A lot of times it's comforting to put your child's care in someone else's hands, especially at the very beginning of a traumatic injury or a disease diagnosis, when you just don't know what to do. As parents, we're still trying to wrap our heads around what just happened. I will say that it's extremely important to trust the medical experts. I'll also say that it's just as important to know that you are an integral part of the healthcare team. You may have to make some pretty big decisions early on in the process. Do your research. Speak to other medical experts if time permits, which in a lot of cases it doesn't, and ultimately be okay with whatever decision you make. It's going to seem extremely overwhelming, but the more involved you are, the more your confidence and the ability to care for your child will grow. So how do we get involved? In a previous episode, I explained the story of our daughter Ella's misdiagnosis, which ultimately resulted in the removal of one of her kidneys. The first 2 days moved extremely fast, and we didn't really have a choice but to trust what her doctors were telling us. After her initial surgery, my husband and I began to do a lot more research, which ultimately led to our decision to move across country. And I'll say that we've been extremely involved ever since, and I believe it served us well. For example, when we touched down in Los Angeles, our first meeting with her oncologist was to discuss the way ahead in the next 15 to 18 months of treatment. We were sat down, given a packet, told to read it, discuss the content, and the possibility of enrolling in any clinical trials. So learn as much as you can about the proposed treatment plan and see if there are any clinical trials available. You want to be in a hospital that specializes in your child's diagnosis, but if you can't, see if your doctor can reach out to or consult with another doctor at another hospital that does specialize in your child's injury or diagnosis, or even reach out and get a second opinion yourself. Don't feel guilty about getting another opinion. About 9 months into Ella's treatment, I felt guilty about reaching out for another opinion just on the trajectory of Ella's care, because at one point early on, her case became very rare, and I felt like 2, 3, and even 4 heads were better than one. I felt like I was cheating on her doctor, whom I love and trust, but at the time I felt like I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't do my due diligence as a parent. Look, treatment plans change, and I felt it was important to have all the information so that I can anticipate what her doctor was going to recommend or even suggest in these upcoming clinical appointments. We wrote every question down so we could be prepared for these discussions and these very important meetings. One thing that helped but requires caution are kind of disease-specific Facebook groups that are created. There is one for neuroblastoma, and while they can be depressing, I would be lying if I didn't say I got some very good information that I was able to take back and then ask her doctor in these meetings about. There's a lot of parents on there who share experiences and, give guidance or just even advice to other parents who are trying to navigate through this. So use those cautiously and in spurts. So definitely learn about other treatment options and clinical trials, and do not be afraid to get a second opinion. Be engaged with hospital staff and other parents' networks. I will be speaking about building and maintaining a relationship with hospital staff in another episode. But if your hospital has any parents' networks, I would definitely encourage you to get involved, even if it's just to kind of sit back and listen. I'd be lying if I said I didn't get some good information from these groups. And to be honest, it's just a bit more comforting to speak to other parents who actually know what you're going through. Next thing, don't be afraid to ask for accommodations that are going to make it easier or more comforting for you and your child. I mean, early on, Ella has scans, and early on her scans seem to be scheduled no fail all the time for the afternoon, which is torture for a toddler because she has to be sedated during these scans, which means she can't eat for 12 plus hours before the scan. So no breakfast, and a lot of times no lunch. And you can imagine how that goes for a 2 going on 3-year-old. Sometimes scheduling can accommodate it, but you have to be able to speak up. I mean, the quality of life during treatment for you and your child is important. Their ability to eat is important for healing. Stay engaged with scheduling departments and advocate for your child when an opportunity presents itself. Another example, at the start of Ella's treatment, I was breastfeeding. Let's not forget, Ella was diagnosed literally 2 weeks after I gave birth to her little brother, Francis. So I was breastfeeding, and due to COVID, the hospital's policy at the time was they cannot store breast milk for anybody but the patient. So we'd have these inpatient stays, and I'd have to pump for my son, but I couldn't store it in the hospital freezer like every other mom who is storing for the patient. So literally the nurses had to come and bring ice around the clock, and I had to bring a mini cooler. It became too much, and I really wanted the nurses to focus on the care of my child and not bringing ice around the clock for my son. So I brought it up to our social worker and our family patient experience liaison, and I will tell you, I've used them ever since. I mean, they've been great. So, those relationships matter, and you never know. You could affect change just by speaking up. You are not powerless. In fact, you could put yourself in a position to help your medical care team. Early on, I mentioned that my husband and I tracked everything we do. I could be laying up in bed at night. I'll pull out our Google Sheets document and write a question or track, something that happened earlier that day, whatever it is. But it helps us stay on top of not only medications, but really on top of hospital staff. You'll never believe it. I had a nurse tell me while inpatient one time, she saw me just kind of tracking everything, blood pressures. Okay, what medication is that? Putting it in. And she said, wow, you don't see that often, is what she said. She said, thank you. We are only human, and we like to see parents be engaged. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many parents don't know what kind of medications are going through their child. So I found that eye-opening and just kind of enlightening, and that just reassured me that we are doing the right things. We are checking on them as much as you shouldn't have to. You really should not have to worry about this at all. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't catch things in the process. Another example, Ella, there was at one point she was getting shots every day. I mean, she still gets shots, but just every day. And when I got home, I looked at the actual prescription, the dosage on the shot she was given from the pharmacy, completely wrong. And, going back and forth with the oncology team, the pharmacists, they were both kind of pointing fingers. But because I check everything, I saw that the dosage was double what she was supposed to get. That's just one example. And again, you shouldn't have to worry about that as a parent, but it's just something that we learned early on. And I wish someone would have told us from day one, kind of what I'm sharing with you now. So let's recap. Know the treatment plan. Ask questions. If able, speak to other experts. Be engaged with the hospital staff. Advocate for your child. Get organized and track what you can. Be okay with your decisions. Again, trust your mom stinks and know your power. If there is any time to assert yourself, that time is now. Thanks for tuning in. Ella Strong. See you next time.
I love you, I love you, I love you.